Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am here again to chat about some video games. It was an interesting weekend, so I thought I would jump on here and say hello to everyone again, do a bit of a chat about uh, Summer Games Fest, as well as something that has popped into my head over the course of the weekend. And just to sort of say what I think, sort of tease out, I often think that I'm not fully sure what I think, and that once I, what a weird thing to say, and once I start discussing it sort of out loud, I find it easier to figure out what I say. I used to do writing like that, and I would do some. If there was something I wanted to parse through in my head, if you write about it, I find it's a good way of clarifying things in your head. So I'm on my lunch break now. I'm about to go and do a spin workout in my afternoon for my sort of morning after slash early afternoon workout. But yeah, I wanted to jump on here as the dust was settling on what was quite a cool weekend of video game showcasing. And then yeah, we'll move on to what I want to chat about. And yeah, as usual, we'll start with what I've been playing. So I finished up Death Stranding last week. That was a cool game. I don't think I've got all that much more to say about it other than what I'd already said, apart from I love that game overall. It was great. I'm very much excited for Death Stranding 2 because the sort of preview coverage in the run up to this game suggests that it is really taking note of what Death Stranding does well and what Death Stranding does less well, and really built upon that and mixed in a lot of Metal Gear elements. I mean, I think one of the frustrating things I found about Death Stranding was that I would actively try and avoid combat, and even to the point that sometimes if I found myself in combat, I would restart the game and reload a save so that I could just avoid it again next time. They've really tightened that up and made it a bit more Metal Gear 5-ish, so very much interested in doing that. And like sort of to build on it, I can't remember if I mentioned it on the last one, but they would have lots of weapons that you just wouldn't engage with because they would be lethal weapons, and it was really not in your interest to kill anyone in the game. So I'm going to move so I can get more comfortable. So yeah, it feels like they have changed things to enable the weapon use to be a bit more diverse and actually encourage you to use the weapons, whereas I felt like often Death Stranding didn't encourage you to make use of the weapons. Obviously, still playing Balatro, just sort of had a few wins. I'm just sort of slowly trying to make my way up the difficulty levels. Every time I win, I move on and try and bring the next deck up to the same difficulty level. I'll be playing that game for years. Atomfall, I started jumping back in. I bought the DLC for that because the DLC looked great, and yeah, I'm just always keen for more Atomfall, to be honest. I've sort of hit a stumbling block almost immediately in that I was telling Alex that when I loaded up the game, I was like, oh, I'll just use my previous save because I've got like upgraded weapons and things like that. There's not a huge amount that really matters in this game. However, in terms of like leveling up, you don't level up, so to speak. You kind of do actually by finding stats and stuff around the place. But yeah, I've got this character that I've got upgraded stats and weapons, and I was like, I'll jump in with them and go and explore the new area. Unfortunately, the save was made past the point of no return, so I really need to start a new game. So it's a bit of a bummer because I'm just like, I wanted to play more Atomfall, but I didn't want to play more Atomfall that I've already played. But we will get there. I found the entrance to the new area, so I might just go straight for that, play that, and then move on before I, just sort of avoid engaging with the rest of the game. Not sure. I need to think about that and probably get back to it. Is it World of Lana or some Planet of Lana or something like that? I've also just bought that. I was chatting to Kelsey as the conference was going on, and he was very excited by a sequel to Planet of Lana, I think it's called. So I had a look on Steam. It's deck verified, and it was like £4 or something like that. So I said, I'm going to buy this because I'm waiting for my next big game, but I just don't know if I'm sort of mentally in the position to be jumping into it yet. I've just come off the back of, I've basically just played long games since the beginning of the year. I wonder if I can quickly pull up my games played this year, media list, because every time I complete a game, I like to. It's Google Sheets. Yeah, I like to keep a list of the games I complete throughout the year, just for the fun of it, but also if I end up any sort of end of the game of the year discussions at the end of the year, and then I have this list of games that I've played through to refer back to. So let's have a look. Yeah, so since the start of the year, what have we played? Metro 2033. I mean, it's not a massive game, but it's not short. Then Warhammer Space Marine 2, Dishonored, which was massive. Braid was quite short. Dishonored 2 again, big game. Eternal Strands, RPG, quite long. Balatro, ongoing. Dishonored, Death of the Outsiders, quite long-ish. Avowed, big long game. Ghostbusters, not that long. 33 Immortals, not that long. Atomfall's pretty big-ish. South of Midnight, nah, not so much. And then after that, the next game I've completed would be Expedition 33, big long JRPG-ish, and Death Stranding is a massive, massive game. So, yeah, I'm sort of wavering between what I want to play, but I want to play something fairly short. If I got a list of what I actually am thinking about playing, yeah, thinking about playing next. Mind's Eye's out this week. I've got my eye on that. Ha ha ha. The problem is the previews don't seem to be that promising for this game, so we'll wait and see what happens with that. Death Stranding 2, I'm tempted to just sort of wait till later in the month and dive into that and just sort of play smaller stuff till then. Outer Worlds, now that I was seeing Outer Worlds 2, I think looks great. So I need to get into Outer Worlds. Probably would quite like to finish that. I might look up the release date for that game, see when it's coming out, and then aim to play that. I was trying to see if my phone was near me because I'm sitting with my feet up now and I'd have to lean forward to see if I can find it. Let's do it. Since we've done it already, we're here to chat and hang out. Let's get the Outer Wilds is another game that I've perennially got on my list of games to play as well. Maybe that's one I can dig into and see. Outer Worlds 2 release date. It's in October. Yeah, okay. So I don't think that'll be next, but I think I'm going to aim to try and play through Outer Worlds before the second one comes out. And then also I really want to play Kingdom Come 2, but I also, so I'm simultaneously, I want to try Kingdom Come the first to see if I like it. If I don't like it, it's not going to put me off playing it too. However, I would, in an ideal world, like to have played through the whole series. So if I can find a way to get into that game, I'm gonna try and play that. And I got it at like the start of the year for like £1 or something like that. So it's going to be worth it if I can get into it. It's certainly worth a try. And another game popped into my head there and then popped straight back out again. Not sure. I've gone back to. I'll shout it out if I remember. A game I potentially want to play. What was it? Anyway, I'll shout out when it comes back into my head because it no doubt will. I've also been dipping back into Hitman World of Assassination. I did this. I was like going to take my PC downstairs because that's where the most of my gameplay lives. And I dragged it down, dragged it out, and then I was like, nah, I want to play it on Xbox. So I stupidly went and bought it on Xbox. So now I've been playing through that on Xbox. I've played quite a bit over the weekend, but all I've really been doing is trying to catch up in the story as to where I got, which was the last level of the first Hitman I got there. Basically, what my rule is when I'm playing through the story, I did a lot of the escalation stuff in PC. That's probably where I spent most of my time playing with friends. But yeah, what my rule is on each map is there's like, when you open up the campaign, you can look, there's like obviously more ways to kill people than the game shows you in this. Like there's usually much, much more. But there's like story missions. So I try and complete each of those before I move on to the next game. And then what if I sort of feel like dipping into something else or coming back to it, I can then sort of dig into the extra features later on. There is one thing I was thinking about as I was playing it is they've added I'm not sure what they call it, but there's a sort of roguelite run-based mode that they've added since I've last played this game. which is quite a while now. Essentially, you can like build up a base, and like you build a base, you can put stuff in it, and then you go and you take on contracts to earn money, which I think you can then take back to the start. You can complete it though. That's one thing I don't quite understand. Anyway, that's another thing I need to dig into. But yeah, plenty to play. However, I'm not really stuck on anything at the moment. I've just been sort of drifting about with whatever takes my fancy, which is fine. However, yeah, I just feel like I've spent most of the year with quite a clear focus. And yeah, for the first time in about half a week, I finished Death Stranding very early on in the week. So like for most of a week now, I've just been not sure quite what to play. And anytime I've been thinking, right, that's what I'm going to play, I turn it on, futz about with it for a little bit, and then I think, oh, actually, this isn't quite what I wanted. Oh, one other thing I did play, now that you mentioned that, is I completed the very first Doom for the first time ever, I think. That was great. That was a cool game. Remains to be a cool game and a shock to absolutely nobody. So yeah, if you've got any suggestions about what I should play or pick up or give a go, please do, because I'd be interested to hear what you've got as a suggestion. So the next segment is, I guess if you're listening to this podcast, you don't really need me to run through everything that's happened at the showcase. So I've made a quick list of things that, so one, I wanted to talk about things that the concerns I've got that have sort of raised their heads since the weekend, or even since the conclusion of the weekend, and I've been sort of mulling over everything that's happened. So I've got a couple of those, and then I thought I would sort of wait the positive stuff to the end so we can leave in a positive, and then we'll move on. And I've just made a short list about games and things that have caught my eye that I think I'm very much excited for, so we can finish on a positive. In terms of concerns, first up, I had a quick look through, and again, most of this is going to be based around the Xbox showcase. Not all, but most, because I actually thought the rest of them were quite weak, if I'm quite honest. The Xbox showcase, it was a very, very good showcase without having anything that blew me away, if that, I think, is fair. There was no, I mean, bearing in mind that it's difficult to do because there's a lot of new IPs, that things that have sort of mainly caught my attention have mostly been new IPs, and just by dint of them being unknown quantities, they're not going to have that oh my god moment that something like a Gears of War, a Halo, or a Witcher, or something that is more entrenched and established in the industry would have. So it's just a sort of nature of the beast. I don't think Sony continue to not have much going on. I think that might continue for a little while. Mainly because it seems like they threw their lot in with live service, and that has really fallen on its ass for them. So I think while they go away and try and regroup, they're going to look a little bit bare. And also, they're not really being pushed by anyone. Microsoft are releasing all their games on PlayStation now. They don't Nintendo. So like, I just don't see that they've got many reasons to really sort of try and bring their pipeline on, because they're going to be selling consoles and games regardless without even having to really do much. It's one of the drawbacks, I guess, from having an industry that has diminishing competition going around, let's say, because of the direction, for good or ill, that Microsoft are choosing to take their business. So I think it leaves everyone in that regard in a poorer position, because Sony aren't being pushed. Sony are at their best when they're scrapping and they're trying to outdo competitors. And we've seen before, when they get comfortable, they get dodgy. And Microsoft, the same thing. They don't care now about hardware, so they'll just be making games. Don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. Time will tell. Anyway, 007 First Light. I am officially concerned about that game. I thought when this was announced they're making a Bond game, and given who was making it, IO Interactive, and they were riding high on the Hitman franchise when that was announced, I was like, right, this is a perfect IP for a perfect development team. And we got our first look at it this weekend, and I'll be honest, it looks concerning. I think I would say James Bond looks like generic character central. He's just like, let's make him as bog standard, generic, and uninteresting as possible, and that's what they've done. In the gameplay, so when I sort of look at it's clearly running on whatever engine the Hitman games run on, by the looks of it anyway, in terms of like character movement and stuff like that. And I will say, as good as Hitman is, and as much as I like it, as much as I love that game, it's not a great action game. And from what I saw, this Bond game is going heavily in the action direction. I was hoping to see more. I mean, it didn't have to just make a Hitman game and put Bond in it. You can do different stuff. But for me, like, we've had a lot of action, first-person shooter, third-person, like, action Bond games. And yeah, some of them are great. GoldenEye, obviously, is an all-timer. But what I was hoping to see was something new, just a bit more of a take on the suave, the sneakiness, just being a bit outthinking your opponent side of Bond rather than running gun punch people in the face all the time, which I think would have lent well into the sort of, I don't know, a similar format, sort of Hitman mixed with, this is really going to age me, but Hitman mixed with the Mission Impossible game on Nintendo 64. So whereas, like, yeah, you've got a dangerous, and sometimes action will happen, but it is in your interest to avoid action, go and sneak about, complete missions, do things, and then get out of there without being spotted. So, like, maybe you turn up at a party as a fake guy, and then you've got to try and make your way upstairs, plant a bug, or find a piece of evidence, and then get out of there without getting caught. That's the kind of stuff I was looking for. It didn't have to be like assassination missions, but like being sneaky and rolling with it and figuring out the sort of, the thing that's great about Hitman is essentially feels like going into a little like sandbox or diorama, and it's like, right, this is what you need to do, this is who you are, off you go and figure out how to do it. And everything is like, is it a Rube Goldberg machine? You like pull on one string and it causes something else to happen over there, and you just sort of have to figure out the mechanics of the level and like poke it at its size and maneuver things around as well as yourself to get what you wanted. And that's what I wanted from a Bond game. That doesn't seem to be what we're getting so far. And if it's just going to be an action game, I think that's going to be a problem. The Xbox showcase, what have we got in here? So, I mean, caveat this was, I am quite excited for the Xbox handheld. However, upon further reading, I'm maybe not quite as excited as I once was for it. So when I saw it, I was like, yes, finally, this is what I want. I love my Steam Deck. And if I could just access my Xbox games on a handheld a la Steam Deck style, then that's, for me as a player, given that most of my games are on my Xbox, that's perfect. Sort of slept on it, woke up, was watching more preview coverage of it, and it turns out it's basically just an Xbox branded version of something that already exists, with maybe a more streamlined OS, but it's unclear to me whether this sort of new promised part delivered Microsoft OS is going to compete with Steam OS is going to be rolled out on other consoles. But anyway, it's going to be on this one, and unfortunately it's going to have game streaming, so I suppose most games, well, certainly Game Pass games will work on it. However, I loaded up my PC this morning and had a look at my game library on PC of like owned games, and there's not many. I think there's like 10 or so, and given that I've got thousands of games, that's not very many. So unless it's a Play Anywhere title, this is an Xbox PC handheld, not an Xbox console handheld, which is to me, there's a very big distinction there. Bit bummed by that. I think as time goes on, that, and again, because Microsoft seem to be exiting the hardware business, it seems like that's going to become less and less of an issue as time goes on. However, at the moment, yeah, it's just a bit of a bummer. Obviously price dependent, because they haven't told us that, and the ROG Alloys tend to be quite expensive. I think I'll still get it. However, yeah, I am less excited than I was for it before. But yeah, I think that's mostly the negatives. I think like the chief negative for me was that there was a lot on show, but either things we already were excited about. There's not a huge amount of new stuff that I didn't already know about that I'm now pumped for. No like big hitters, no like Last of Us, Halos, Gears of War. Well, there was a bit of Gears of War, but it was stuff that we already knew about. And yeah, so I think as far as the shows go, the Microsoft one was excellent without being like my socks were still on. But I enjoyed hoping that helicopter that's outside my window won't be picked up on this. But yeah, excited, had a great time, was engrossed for the entirety of it, for the Xbox one at least. And then like coming away from it thinking, yeah, there's not the big stuff that we got last year. But overall, enjoyed it. Anyway, let's be more positive. So the next segment I want to talk about is mainly the stuff that is jumping out to me is stuff that I'm becoming very excited for. So Resonance, Plague Tale Legacy. The Plague series, this one looks to be going to ancient Rome. It shows a gladiator arena and a woman running from monsters. I'm interested enough to see that I want to see this unfold. I think it was either towards the start of last year, I played through all the Plague Tale games and I had a thoroughly lovely time with it. It was a series that I'd slept on for ages, but for some reason, I just felt like I was in the mood to play it and loaded them up and ended up just playing through the series. And it's great. Really great. And so I'm happy to see another one, and I'm probably in from day one unless something happens that tells us it's terrible. There was a couple issues with how the last one ran. They had to do a bit of fixing after the release, in fact, to make it run properly. But I missed all that, and by the time I got to it, it was just a fully formed, decent game. The interesting one about this is that, yeah, it seems to be ancient Rome, so different place, probably different century, I think, and which means it's going to be a whole new story. Might be a prequel. Can't really. It's difficult to tell, to be honest. I think it probably looks like it's going to be a prequel. Set in a new place, which I guess gives them the freedom to make a new story within the confines of the lore and the world that they've created. And yeah, I'm fine by that. I don't need everything to run in this epic long saga because at some point I'll get bored. I mean, Assassin's Creed is an example of that, and I just don't need that. So happy that it's new. Want to see what they do. They've not let me down yet, so I'll probably be in until proven otherwise. Looks nice. Blood of the Dawnwalker. I think the story in this looks interesting. I think it seems to be... So when I read about this a couple months ago in PC Gamer, and it was about... Seemed to be what turn out to be vampires rescue someone's daughter, and as a sort of reward or consequence of them rescuing his daughter, I think the dad gets bitten by the vampire and becomes this daywalker or dawnwalker, basically a vampire that can walk throughout the day. Blade. That looks fine. It looks interesting. Looks fun. The thing that's sort of making me interested about this game is that it's a team made up of predominantly ex-Witcher 3 developers and CDPR staff. So yeah, just because of how much I love The Witcher 3, I'm sort of on the train for this until pushed off by something to do. So yeah, I'm interested and excited to see more of that, because I think from what I could tell, it seems to be shaping up solidly, and interesting. Talking about solid, interesting, fun, this game looks absolutely fantastic. Is Clockwork Revolution. This is the second time I think we've seen this, and we got a good chunk of gameplay in this one, a good breakdown of what the story is going to be like, and a lot about certain characters within the game. I am so excited for this game. I think this is going to turn out to be a better version of BioShock than the BioShock games, and it probably will be out before BioShock Lad finally releases his next game, because that's just, who knows when that's coming. Loads of interesting stuff. I think they gave us a peek of how the character creator is going to work, and I think that is a lovely novel way. Usually like a game like that, I'll just make you make a character, then drop you in. This one like sort of built the character creator into the game, and that there was a guy going into a police station, I think, and then he's like sort of describing a mugshot of the guy that robbed him, and that's you, and he's sort of describing him as you make the character, and I just thought that was so inventive and interesting and fun. The other thing, there seems to be like some sort of gun building mechanic going on in that game, and that looks really fun in a way. I wonder if it'll finally deliver the promise that Borderlands was supposed to, and that like all these guns, you were meant to be your own gun that you created a story with, or was that Destiny? When it just tended to turn out to just be a bunch of random guns that you used and then dumped. So this one looks like there might actually be scope to make something quite unique and fun. The shooting looked solid. The story looked great. It looked funny, like just oozing like the little mechanical people going around the world doing jobs. Like there's one little robot sweeping up around the place, and it just absolutely oozing with character. And I'm extremely excited to see more of that. And I'll probably be getting in on that again, unless something in the previews tell us that it's terrible. Two other games that I am. So they've got two more games I want to quickly discuss. And these are like caveated excitement in that I'm interested in them, but not fully on board. And the first one would be Chronos. I think the vibes that game's given out looks like a sci-fi Silent Hill, and I'm very, very interested to see this develop. The thing that's sort of holding me back is its Bloober team. And I think they've got a very patchy history. Some of their games are fantastic. Some of their games are terrible. And Silent Hill 2 Remake, which would be the one I still haven't played that yet because it didn't run well enough on my PC at launch. I'm assuming it's a bit more fixed now, but yeah, just sort of the moment passed with that game. I will get to it eventually, but the moment passed with that game because they couldn't release a game. They made me buy a game that wasn't finished. So I am sort of on board with the vibes and how Chronos is setting up. I am aware that Bloober team don't always hit their marks, don't always stick the landing, and have a track record of releasing games that don't work properly at launch. So hope it's good. Wary of this one. Wary, but slightly different for slightly different reasons, is from the Summer Games Fest show with Jeff Keighley, is the game called Ill. This looks disgusting in all the best ways possible. Again, this seems to be some sort of horror game. The enemies move and just seem hugely unsettling. I don't know anything about the developer, and I don't really know a huge amount about the game. Just tonally, after having watched that trailer, I really want to see more of it. It looks great fun. And another game that I didn't have on my list that I just remembered as I was talking about horror games. Obviously, the announcement of Resident Evil 9. We've seen basically nothing. We know where it's going to be set now. And I think I was listening to the First Aid Spray podcast over the weekend. We sort of know the relationship of the main character, and I forget now. It's from a game I've not played. So we sort of know the themes of this game without knowing how it's going to actually play. I haven't played all the Resident Evil games, not even close, but I haven't been back to Raccoon City itself in some time. I'm trying to think. Obviously, Raccoon City in 1. No, you're in the you're in the mansion in 1. You're not in Raccoon City at all. 2, you're in the RPD, so that's Raccoon City. 3, yeah, you're in Raccoon City as well. 4, you're not. 5, you're not. 6, didn't like enough to stick with. 7 and 8, you're not. And I think that's all the Resident Evil games I've played. Obviously, the remakes and stuff in there as well. Yeah, so I've not been back. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what that's like, because there's after a big event, which seems to I need to remind myself about RE lore. But anyway, yeah, that looks cool. Very much looking forward to seeing more about that. And I guess that's it. That's all I've really got. I'd love to if you would tell me what you were interested in. And anything that you feel like I've missed out and that I should have eyes on and be excited about or put on my radar, that would be that would be interesting. So yeah, hit me up on Blue Sky for that, SuperSmiley, and tell me what you thought of the show. I wanted to move on to this, so I will caveat this. This is the thing that I spoke about at the start. I'm not fully sure how I feel about it. I just sort of wanted to sort of talk about it and parse it out. And I may come to a conclusion by the end of this, and I might not, to be quite honest with you. But I suddenly wanted to discuss the increasingly blurry lines between sort of games media and the video game industry itself. Like I said, I kind of, as I was sort of writing my notes for this, I kind of considered not discussing this because I'm not actually sure anything negative has happened over the weekend. However, it's playing on my mind enough that I don't feel fully comfortable with some of the things that are happening. And yeah, I guess I'll explain myself, and then you can tell me what you think. So it sort of jumped up after I was thinking about Lucy James was on stage this weekend at the Summer Games Fest. And by extension of that, just general media properties or people that cover media in a critical fashion suddenly acting as hype men for the games industry. I'm not sure how you would see Jeff Keighley's show. It's not like they're popping up working for Microsoft or Sony. Maybe people have in the past and I've missed it. But yeah, like I guess Jeff Keighley's is essentially a trade show, right? He sells slots for his show, and then they will highlight them. I'm always wary when people that we rely on to cover video games in a critical fashion find themselves acting as hype men or people for video games in the industry that they're supposed to be offering an honest, unbiased opinion of. It jumped up, like I said, it came to my mind when Lucy James was on stage, and I'm like, is there a conflict of interest there? I think probably not. I think in this instance, it's probably okay. But I just would like them to be a bit more upfront and honest about how this coverage goes. I mean, I was thinking about Lucy James recently, and this is not a bash or even a comment particularly on Lucy James. It's just because it's popped up in my mind because it was her on the stage. As far as I could tell, she was radio silent on the stuff that happened around Giant Bomb and when that blew up, because she is paid by the company that it was blowing up around. So she seemed to have stayed very quiet. And probably rightly so. I mean, if she had waded in, would she have really added anything to the discourse? And also, because of who's paying her, and then also on the flip of that, it being her friends that were on the other side of that stuff, you maybe wouldn't necessarily take her opinion as a professional fully at face value, right? There's a lot of other stuff wrapped up in that, so it probably was right to be quiet. So what I mean is it's not a critique, but it's just, I just feel like, so we'll put Lucy James to one side because I think ultimately that's fine. It was just her on stage that sort of jumped up into my head. The one that really has had me thinking was Chris Dring. Over the weekend, he was popping up on the VGC podcast quite often, doing, I mean, like heavily quotation marks here, but they called the podcast reviewing of X conference, right? And I get it. People need to make money, and when you boil it down, yeah, people need to make money, and this was a sort of advertising thing. But he was on a podcast, essentially reviewing a show that was being run and organized by his business partner, being Jeff Keighley. So for those, I'm sure people all know, but for those that don't, Chris Dring has recently left video game industry biz. Anyway, a business-focused video game website, and he's gone out and started his own thing called the Games Business. Much of and in partnership with Jeff Keighley, who is a funder of his new business. So when that So essentially, yeah, Jeff Keighley is a part owner of a new media-based company that is reviewing the Jeff Keighley show. And I don't think enough was made obvious that Jeff Keighley is actually involved. Like, they're not hiding it in any way. It was on the press releases and stuff like that. But I feel like when Chris Dring's appearing, discussing from a critical perspective and reviewing the quality of the Summer Games Fest show, there needs to be a bit of recognition here that he is financially in bed with the person running that show, right? I'm not suggesting that there's any sort of corruption going on here. No, not at all. But I do think that perception is important. I think if we look around at our political climate at the moment, there's a lot of perception of how politicians act and the trustworthy or not nature of them, which then has been exploited by, which politicians then sort of take that and exploit the media to the point that people now have a severe distrust for the media for whatever reason. And I think as a community, we need to, well, two things. One, we need to be aware of this, meaning that if you're going to take money and make a living out of working in a creative in a creative space, yes, but in a space that is essentially makes your money from discussing and critiquing the video game industry, I think you need to be very careful about the additive stuff that you then take on around that, because you live and die on your opinion, and people. And it's not only do you live and die on your opinion, but the industry, the critical industry at large, lives and dies on people maintaining their reputations. Because for each person that does that guy at IGN, that really does not adhere to any sort of moral code when it comes to critical coverage of things, that then casts seeds of doubt into everyone else across the industry. And like I say, I think Lucy James, I'm not fully comfortable with her crossing from critical voice to hype voice. But I actually, when you start asking the question about what it is that she's not doing right, I've got less of an answer for you. So I think probably as long it doesn't sit easily with me. However, I think overall it's probably fine. The Chris Dring stuff doesn't sit quite as easily with me. I will say. And again, like, however these people define themselves, whether that's games press, influence, content creators, or whatever, these people are in the business of guiding the narrative of the video games industry. And they are there to cover the talking point in whatever news and offer opinions about upcoming games, etc. If they're going to do that, I think they need to be clear about what their involvement expectations about their involvement in other events and other people involved in these events are. In the same way that, as to why, I think, again, to be my second point, I said I had 2 points and then just made one. My second point being that we as a population need to be willing to pay for our news rather than get it for free. In the same way that if a newspaper takes ad money, for example, from something like, I don't know, a baby formula company, and then it turns out that said baby formula manufacturing company has been knowingly or unknowingly, but through negligence, releasing contaminated products into the market that make babies unwell, how far would you then trust this news company to be honest and balanced about the coverage? I mean, I'm sure in a lot of cases they would be honest and balanced. However, there's enough there that the question would be close enough to home that it should give you pause for thought. And I'm sort of there with the Jeff Keighley stuff. I think you only need to look at his sort of sycophantic relationship he seems to have with Kojima, and then realize that he may not have editorial involvement, but he is financially involved in media companies that are there to critique the industry. And then the person who is involved in the editorial side, Chris Dring, is discussing Jeff Keighley's events without making that abundantly clear. I mean, I would have just recused myself from reviewing the show. He's offering critique of the show, and I just think there's just a lack. I was going to say dirtiness to it. If not dirty, there's a scum on it. there's a lack of cleanliness, and it's not as clean as I would quite like it to be. And yeah, I guess that's kind of all I had to say on it. How I feel about it, I think I've boiled down to sort of, I don't know if I personally would do it, but I can sort of let the Lucy James stuff go. I don't think there's really much of a problem there. However, the Drain Keeley stuff just does not sit nicely with me, especially like when they were giving it review scores. And I know like this needs to be taken tongue in cheek because it's not like reviewing a trade show is ridiculous at the best of times. However, he's still doing it, right? He's giving things like the Jeff Keighley's show, I think he gave it a better score than he gave the Xbox one. And like, yeah, okay, like we might just have a different opinion. That's entirely possible. But I cannot see how people would look at these shows and say that the Summer Games Fest was anything like as good as the Xbox one. The variety, the quantity, the type of games that were on show, what we got to see, just was it, to me. It's the Xbox stuff was objectively better than anything Summer Games Fest had, other than the Resident Evil 9 announcement at the end. And I think like again, like fully aware that some people might listen to this and say, "Oh, you're making a mountain out of a molehill," but also I will say that if something that is clearly unimportant, and I get the impression that I wouldn't even say he's being dishonest. I just think he's maybe cutting Jeff a bit of slack that I don't think someone that wasn't in his position would do. So if he's doing that about something that actually doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, when something does matter, I now have pause about whether I can and can't trust what he's going to be delivering on that. And I think like, so if Jeff Keighley ended up in the news, or Summer Games Fest was in the news, or even Kojima now, because of how intricately intertwined Jeff and Kojima appear to be for some reason, not sure I trust him to give an honest opinion. And I guess what I've done there is I've stumbled across the problems with media at large, and that's not just linked to the video game industry. That would be linked to any sort of media at all, in that, especially with the video game industry, it's such a relatively small industry. We have to accept that people are going to know each other. Keely's going to have friends that are video game developers. They all do. They're going to have PR friends. I just think we need to be clear, transparent, and honest about these things. And I think one way we could have improved that is by Chris String not bothering to do the VGC podcast this weekend. He could have just stayed out of that. I don't think it would have affected his coverage very much. I don't think it would have affected anyone's opinion on it. He could have just stayed out of this. I don't know. Interested to see. Do you think I'm making a mountain of it a molehill? It is an absolute minefield these days to try and fish and source proper news, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's games, whether it's politics, whether it's like local news. It is hard now because of the proliferation of media. Anyone like me can just pull out a microphone and say whatever I want, and people will call it news. So I think if you're in one of the privileged positions, let's say, to be able to do this as a day job, then I think you need to be strict with what you're doing. And I just think you missed it on that one. It's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. And more than it being a criticism of anyone in particular, it just sort of held the mirror up to how odd games coverage has become. And I think it's going to continue to get more odd. And I just think we all need to be vigilant and a bit more careful about where we take our news from. And again, like to even build on that in a different sort, Nintendo released their Switch 2 this week and didn't send out review copies. So there's people buying this product sight unseen, without getting a chance to play it and things like that. And I think that is poor. And when independent voices are diminished, then we all lose out. It's not just the consumer companies do as well, because coverage is less. I mean, I can't believe a console launched this week and there was so little coverage of it. So we all miss out, and we all are worse for it. So here's to open, frank, honest editorial policies. And yeah, that's it. I hope that was interesting. As I said last week, I'm hoping that this was going to settle into a proper cadence come July, when my contracted hours properly change. It might be all over the place till then, but I wanted to get this up and running and get into somewhat of the swing of things before I started in earnest. For the most part, you'll get these podcasts on a Friday or Saturday. This one's early, but that was just because of Summer Games Fest. I did plan to record a podcast straight after the Xbox showcase, but by the time it finished, I was like, no, I can't be bothered. So I'll come back to it when I've had a sleep and had a chance to think about it. Again, like I say, my aim is I want to create some sort of gaming discourse. So whether you agree or disagree with what I've just talked about, please let me know. Give me a shout on Blue Sky at SuperSmillie. And I can't imagine I'm new to anyone listening, but if you are, I'm also a co-host of the Winners You podcast, which is a sort of mix between deep dives on specific games and themed discussions. Tomorrow, I think we're recording a video game draft podcast, and it'll be the year 2011. So check that out, please. I'm also a member of the Gears Intel podcast, so please go ahead and check that out if you're interested in hearing some aging youngish dudes speak about their passion for all things Gears of War. I love doing that podcast, so give us numbers a bump and review us wherever you can. And anyway, thanks for listening. Please subscribe. Check out YouTube if you've listened to this on your phone, and if not, do the opposite. This is a podcast and a video on YouTube. And thanks. Peace.